Hey, it's Carl from artofshred.com, and today we're going to break down the top riffs of the 90s, starting with the top 10 riffs of 1995. And why 95? Well, it's the first year I had a guitar, the first full year. I actually got this very guitar, a Jackson Stealth HX, on December 23rd, 1994. It was half a Christmas gift, meaning I had to pay for half of it. But, and actually, I still have the Guitar Center receipt from the Guitar Center Detroit grand opening. It was just in the gig bag, still sitting there all this time. And I still have the original gig bag that I got with the guitar. So anyway, 95 was kind of an odd year for music, for me anyway. Because at the time, first off, I was heavily into rap at the time. And I wasn't so much into too much guitar-based music besides Nirvana and Black Sabbath, the two reasons I really started playing guitar. Actually, the first song I ever learned was before I even owned a guitar, which was All Apologies by Nirvana. So anyway, I wasn't otherwise. You'll notice there's quite a few metal riffs on this list, but I wasn't a huge metal fan at the time. It wasn't until about a year later and listening to Dimebag and Pantera, thanks to my brother who was a fan of that band, that I started listening to metal. And actually two of the bands on this list I didn't really listen to at all. I just liked riff or two. But anyway, even at that time I was, I had a subscription to Guitar World, all that stuff. I would learn riffs that I liked. And even if I didn't necessarily like the bands. So all of that said, and without further ado, let's get to the list. So number 10 is Water's Edge by 7 Mary 3 from the album American Standard. Now, technically, you could say this isn't from 95 because they had released it a year earlier independently, but they got signed to a record label, re-recorded the album, and in 95, this album had two hits. You might know the more popular one, which is called Curmudgeon, but this Water's Edge riff, like when I heard it, it was like such a perfect, and it's not even so much a riff, it's just like a simple kind of arpeggiated progression, but I just really liked it, and I still like it. So, oh, and fun fact, this album, American Standard by 7 Mary 3, and the album of the number 1 riff on this list were both recorded in the same recording studio, Morrisound Studios in Tampa, Florida. Let's get to the riff. Number 9 is Hard as a Rock from the album Ballbreaker by AC/DC. Now, a lot of people, I think, honestly, including Angus Young, jokingly say that AC/DC just writes the same song over and over. Now, that's obviously not true, and Angus was just a monster at writing catchy riffs, and this was one of them. It's a really simple little riff, but it's fun to play and it sounds great. So here we go. So number 8 is from a band I didn't listen to besides the songs that were on the radio or MTV at the time. And anyway, this was their first, I think, big hit. And the riff is just, it's really cool. It's really fun to play. It's from No Doubt's album Tragic Kingdom, and the song is Just a Girl. number 7 is from just one of the best bands to come out in the 90s, and that's Alice in Chains. And it's from their self-titled album. And the song, it was really tough to pick one riff from this album because Jerry Cantrell is just such a monster riff writer, songwriter. But had to choose something, and I didn't want to put multiple riffs from the same band on this list. So here's Heaven Beside You by Alice in Chains. So number 6, as I mentioned earlier, there's two bands that prompted me to learn guitar. Black Sabbath, Tony Iommi, and Nirvana, Kurt Cobain. But who knew Nirvana had another musical genius in their midst? Actually, I knew Dave Grohl played guitar. I knew he sang because I had a bunch of Nirvana bootlegs. And there was this one song, Marigold, which is a really nice kind of poppy song that he sang and played guitar on. So anyway, but this album was just a real surprise when it came out. I think it was a surprise to everyone, Nirvana fans and non-Nirvana fans. But just an album with, again, kind of a bunch of great riffs. But I will say at the time, I did not give Dave Grohl or Foo Fighters much credit. I think it was hitting too close to home for me because Nirvana was such an influence that I didn't want to think, be reminded maybe. I don't know what it was, teens, they are what they are, right? So anyway, this song specifically, and this riff from Foo Fighters' self-titled album is just great. It's I'll Stick Around. It's a really fun riff to play, and actually I hadn't played it probably since 1995, if I'm being honest, but here we go. For number 5, I had to bust out the trusty slide, which I'm not a slide player. I don't know how to play slide. I hadn't touched this slide probably for 5 years, but well, who knew you could have slide in metal? And honestly, maybe this riff should be higher on this list, but I just couldn't do it because of what's ahead. But Jay Younger, the guitarist from White Zombie, was just a really innovative guitar player, and just he wrote really interesting music, particularly for metal. So if you don't know already, the song is More Human Than Human from the album Astro Creep by White Zombie. But a few things. One, originally I believe it's tuned down to C sharp, and you need kind of high action to play slide, I think, well. And obviously that's not the case with this guitar. I did tune it down one whole step because I didn't feel like constantly tuning, and there's some other songs on this list that are going to be down one whole step. So it is what it is. There's another riff that I hadn't played probably since 1995, so it might be a little bit off, but it is what it is, and let's go with it. All right, number 4. This is an intro that is so instantly recognizable for people who were around during that time and listened to the radio, watched MTV. And for me personally, it's a simple riff, but it hits hard. And the songwriter, Daniel Johns, eventually turned into one of my favorite songwriters of all time. But even at the time, when I got this album, it was just, I mean, it was on regular repeat. The whole album, I loved it when I was a teen, and I still sometimes nostalgia has me put it on. But my favorite Silverchair album is Diorama. You probably haven't heard it, but you should check it out. It's phenomenal. He grew so much as a songwriter. In any case, all of this, like as far as this song, this riff, they were 14 when they wrote this. It was just incredible to me that children similar age to me could do something like this. So anyway, the song is Tomorrow from the album Frog Stomp by Silverchair. Next up at number 3 is one of my favorite bands, and I actually hadn't heard of them until 1996 when I saw them open for Pantera and White Zombie on tour. But I heard the song Bored. I think they opened with it, and I was just immediately hooked on this band. The next day I went out and bought their debut album, Adrenaline. The band is Deftones. The riff at number 3 is Root. It's a really fun riff to play. It's just a really great riff, and this album is just full of them. But again, you got to choose something. So here's Root by Deftones. Coming in at number 2, Down is one of the few bands I regret I didn't get to see back in the 90s. I know they sometimes still tour. I haven't seen them as an adult, and I don't think it's the same. So anyway, wish I would have seen them back then. I didn't. It is what it is. Their 1995 debut album, NOLA, is phenomenal front to back. Tons of great riffs, tons of great songs, but gotta choose one, and I chose Stone the Crow, which was probably their most popular song. But in any case, this verse riff, this kind of intro / verse riff, it's fun to play. It's clean, but it's heavy. They tuned down to C sharp, but for whatever reason, 25 years ago, I learned how to play it a step down instead of C sharp. And it's harder to play like that. But at this point, why fix a 25-year mistake? So here it is, Stone the Crow by Down off the album NOLA. Before we get into the number 1 riff on this list, if you want to see more, please like and subscribe to this channel. Like this video and subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to go through, probably not in order, but top 10 riffs from the 90s. So, number 1, Chuck Schuldiner was, I think, one of the best songwriters of our time, but he didn't really get the credit he deserved because he played death growl metal. So, it's hard to get past that for some people, but if you listen to the music, it's just wonderfully written, progressive metal. It's kind of standard verse, chorus, verse composition, and he had a knack for really catchy hooks, even if he was growling, screaming over them. Unfortunately, and this is another kind of band I regret I didn't get to see live, he died of brain cancer in 2001. So sadly, you know, his riffs will live on, but you know, we'll never hear anything from him again. But I will say I had the chance to see them live, but my brother bailed on me or us the day of, and I was 17 at the time and didn't feel comfortable going to the east side of Detroit by myself, so didn't get to see them. But again, the riffs will live on, and this one is the title track from the album Symbolic by Death. And man, there's so many good riffs on this album. I don't even know if this riff is my favorite on the album. I just think it's so good that it needs to be #1. And that sounds weird, but there's so many good riffs on this album. But this just starts everything off so hard, so heavy, and honestly so simple that yeah, it goes to #1. So here is Symbolic, the intro / verse riff, Symbolic by Death at #1. So there you have it, the top 10 riffs of 1995. I'd love to know which ones you agree with, which ones you disagree with, what I missed. And I will say, I started this list with about 30 songs that I wanted to choose from, but you know, a list of 30 would have been way too long. So I had to pare it down to 10, so I know I missed a bunch, but I would love to know what you think I missed. So share that in the comments if you like. And again, if you want to help this channel and see the other videos in this series, then subscribe and of course like this video. Thanks.